Welcome, everyone. As Joint Land Use Study Program Manager, I'm going to just start with a brief statement to just kind of kick this off before we're going to have our former Vice Chair from the Policy Committee from the last grant kind of start the meeting until we can get around to selecting a new Chair and Vice Chair. Thank you all for coming and continue to participate in sort of this next phase of the Joint Land Use Study process with implementation. We have a number of seats with some of the representatives that we're still filling, so we will have more people participate in the future, but I really appreciate everyone being here. And with that, I guess we can I'll turn it over to Commissioner Tim Payne, and he'll kick us off with the agenda.
Okay. My name is Tim Payne, Fremont County Commissioner. I was the Vice Chair of the previous committee, so Brian asked me to step in and start running this. If somebody has a burning desire to sit here, that would be just fantastic, but don't see a bunch of people. Hi, Mark. And so what we'll start with is introductions. We'll start with Pete over here, and we'll just move around.
Actually, Carl Schuler, I'm standing in for Peter Weiss.
Oh, okay. Well, I went by the sign, so yeah.
I am a second cousin twice removed.
Second cousin twice. Andy Pico, City of Colorado Springs, contrary to your roster. I'm not the Raymond trustee.
And to clarify, he's here on behalf, supposed to be representing PPACG Board. Yeah.
I'm Scott Hobson. I'm representing the City of Pueblo, and I'm an Assistant Mayor's Office.
Carol Harvey from Woodland Park.
And despite what the roster says, my name is Craig Dossian. I'm not a county commissioner. I'm the director of the planning department for the county, El Paso County.
I had to ask Brian about that one. Yeah.
We had some switches, so I apologize for that. So.
I didn't notice the election, but apparently I did really well.
Andre Johnson, Air Force Academy.
I am Amy Kelly. I'm the Community Initiatives Director at the Air Force Academy.
Hal Allgaier, Fort Carson.
Hi, everyone. I am Heba Abdul. I'm Senator Corey Gardner's Regional Director and Military Legislative Assistant based out of Colorado Springs.
Keith Klein, Military Affairs Council and Chairman of the Defense Mission Task Force.
Jack Fisher, Vice Commander out at Schriever.
Bill Thomas, Deputy Mayor, City of Fountain.
Sam Johnson, Vice Commander Peterson.
Reggie Ash, Defense Chief at the Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC.
Hi, I'm Mark Ettenreader, Teller County Commissioner.
And this is Ann Werner. Yeah.
I'm taking a few pictures. JLUS planner too.
And then obviously many of you know me. I'm the Program Manager for Joint Land Use Study.
Okay. Audience, you guys want to introduce yourselves? Go ahead and start there.
John Meyer, Colorado Springs Airport Advisory Commission.
And Bill Nichols with the Airport Advisory Commission.
Andrea Barker with HBA.
I'm Darren Morsemeyer, Community Planner at Schriever Airport.
Okay. We do have a quorum, correct? Okay. All right, we'll move into, anybody has any kind of public comments, talk about how well the Rockies are doing or just about anything else? Yeah.
Andre Johnson, Air Force Academy. Those of you may know we had our ACU's open house yesterday, last night at Northeast Library off of Union. Very good turnout. We appreciate everyone's support. Very strong showing. We know that we still got some work to do there, but yesterday was a positive step, and we're going to continue that work moving forward. So, thanks.
Okay.
We've got some brochures and some handouts here, and we'll get those to you before we adjourn today.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, we'll move on. Do the presentations. Brian?
So today, one of the things that obviously we have a mixture of folks who either were participating in the, can you hear me? Okay. We're participating in the last process with the report and study development, But then we have some new folks that come either through change in command with some of our military partners, or new folks have been selected as the board decided that they wanted to have more of some of the smaller communities participating as much as possible in this process. So with that, we thought we'd start with a brief overview to kind of remind you of kind of how we got here. So item 3A for the JLUS program and JLUS report orientation. We have provided some copies of the draft report. It's a full copy. In the front, you'll find an executive summary, and then it moves into all the chapters that are in there. One of the things we are going to be offering up when we send out an email after this meeting is find out how many would like to get a copy in this format as clear binder, how many people would like to print it as spiral bound, and we'll be getting some copies made to distribute. So that's something to keep in mind going forward. And again, all these reports are available online as well electronically. It was back in 2015 when we got the initial grant funding at that time, and that was something that was selected that the awarding of that funding from the Office of Economic Adjustment, Department of Defense, allowed for the hiring of Joint Land Use Study staff to develop the report, and with the intent that after that there would be the potential for implementation grant funding. With that, as part of development of that report, Chapter 10 within this is the primary chapter that we're going to be looking at through much of this implementation process. And what we did is we took Chapter 10 and we tried to boil it all down into a spreadsheet, which we'll go over later towards the end of the agenda. But what is derived from Chapter 10 is this other handout that we gave us, the spreadsheet. We tried to make it as best as possible so your eyes wouldn't go cross, but I'm sure there is 109 tasks, so it is a lot to look at there. So the rundown is basically there are 12 strategies and about 109 actions. These cover a variety of different items, some of which are ones that we'll be trying to work through as implementation committee. And then there's other ones that may have been noted in the document because someone else is already working on them. Another entity or the military or another community partner is already working on these. So one of the things that we've done is within the document itself, we didn't put too much detail as to, it was kind of a draft and recommendation of who we thought might work on what. And during this process, we can help drill down more into that to figure out where the rubber might hit the road on some of these things, or understanding where it already is happening so that we can track it. And the idea is, as staff, we want to try and track what's going on out there as best as possible, at least as much as it references this. So continuing with this, we really do welcome you to read the report or chapters, the sections you feel most pertain to you. If you have any questions as you're going through the report, obviously you don't have to read the whole thing, but look at those sections that you think are most pertaining to your interests as a stakeholder. And if anything, if you need assistance with navigating the report, we as staff are more than willing to sit down and go through it with you. The idea behind this is that it is a land use study. Therefore, a lot of these items are city planning oriented. So when you're thinking about the realm of what we're doing, we're not getting too far into some other parts of community military partnership that you might see with other entities focusing on. We're not going to be cross-pollinating with, say, a big military care network. They have a very specific mission. So I just want to make sure you understand that we're not going to be doing everything under the sun. We're really going to be trying to focus, at least this implementation group, on what is related more to local government, state government to some extent, and how that intersects with the military along, mostly to do with land use. So with that, are there any questions on the report or anything I mentioned within this part of the orientation? The other thing is, let's see, how many, actually, just so as a show of hands so everyone can see, how many were actually participating in the original Joint Land Use Study process? And that way those who are not can see. Because the other thing is, feel free to contact your fellow committee members if you're looking for some background as to how we may have arrived at a decision. As you'll notice with the committee, and we'll get into this in the next item, that there's a mixture of folks here, some that are elected officials, some that are more technical side. And with that, there's a variety of experiences depending on what happened on the technical committee, what happened on the policy committee. But as much as possible, try to give you assistance as navigating earlier on the process. It's a lot to take in at once, obviously, a lot of content. But, and also, just so those who are new are aware, in fact, there is a sound study report that was prepared just look at measurements of sounds from in terms of the peak decibel level around the Air Force Academy. Now, obviously, that's not going to tie in directly as the ACUS measures it differently. So I just want to make that point that if you're looking through that, you'll notice that there is a substantial difference in terms of how sound was treated in that appendix versus what you'll see in the ACUS if you're looking through that. And the ACUS is online as of a couple days ago.
Right, yeah. It's under the USAFA.mil website, flying operations. So if you Google USAFA flying operations, you should be able to get to the page. Yeah, and I have some copies here that also include the link.
Brian?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair. Could you very succinctly describe why there's such a difference between the two studies? I mean, sound to sound, so why would they come up so differently?
So one of the things that we were looking at with the residential sound, with the study within the areas around Air Force Academy, was that the common comment amongst the citizens that were concerned about flight, they always talked about how it was too loud, it was too much noise. And within the existing ACUS study, that's looking at an average daily sound measurement. And so with the sound study, we had citizens that were saying, oh, see, when it peaks out, it hits this level for a second. It hits a certain high level. And so in order to provide a reference to that, okay, rather than someone holding a decibel meter in the backyard, let's have someone that's an expert at this do kind of the same thing at multiple sites to kind of see how long, what is the peak, how long does it stay there, and how frequently does it occur. And so there was the study looked at 12 different sites around the Air Force Academy over the course of 3-day period to capture sound during that time period, and then did analysis on it to see, okay, what were some of the peak sounds that hit at each of these stations, and then how frequent was there some kind of peak event. And so that's what's, rather than looking at averages over the course of the day or a long period of time, it was trying to provide some data to inform that discussion with citizens who would worry about peak sound as they didn't look at things in terms of average daily sound.
Okay, so which one is peak and which one is average?
So the ACUS, if I am correct, does with the daily average.
Daily average?
24 hours. And this study was looking at...
And the peak sound. Okay, no, that frames it very nicely, thanks, appreciate that. And it doesn't compare anything to having a jet land on your roof, but that's...
Yes, very good.
Can I ask a question about that, Brian? Heba, sorry. I have tons of questions always. My question is, and forgive me, I haven't looked at the sound study, but does it differentiate and distinguish between users? Like who is if we have NGB partners, we have our Colorado National Guard, and they're coming in, they're doing training or fly here, does it distinguish or differentiate between who the users are?
It does not.
Okay.
The difference in the study was that this is measuring sounds that occur in these neighborhoods adjacent, and we tried to note that in the overall domain study as well, that part of the challenge is just because something flies near an installation does not mean it belongs to that installation.
Correct.
And we tried to emphasize that with these residents as well, because there's a lot of civilian flight that occurs over the city in some of the neighboring airspace. So distinguishing between that, they would say, oh, I'm certain it was the Air Force Academy point. Well, you can't be sure. If you could just say Air Force on it could be something else, it's hard to make it out. So that was the thing, that was a common point of discussion during the flight working week and during the course of that study and after.
Thank you.
Along those same lines, commissioners in Fremont County just had a meeting with BLM, and they're going to have a comment period on their HAMMET, on the Army's HAMMET Fort Carson's, which is high altitude mountain environment training, so it's the helicopters touching down, taking off up in high altitude to simulate like Afghanistan. And Commissioner Detmeyer and I were at a meeting about 3 or 4 years ago that was very interesting as far as the residents in Teller County and western Fremont County. There's a lot of reports of these guys chasing elk, chasing cattle, And so now they're revised their scope of their landings to a more remote BLM country out there, and we haven't had near the complaints, but there will be a comment period starting, I think, in October is what I think it's going to be. But anyway, that's going to be coming out with BLM. Anyway, that's just kind of a related note. Okay, so moving on, Ann?
No, it's
You're
still
going to,
me.
you're still you, okay.
We talked about breaking it up, but, so with this next item, obviously the key thing is, why are we here? You know, we formed this implementation committee, we've been awarded this grant, and what we had to do, of course, was try to take what the recommendation we got out of the last two committees, or the last vestiges of that process, and try to gauge what would be a good place to start in terms of the implementation. So again, this is just a kind of a starting point of based upon what came out of the last couple of meetings with the policy committee and technical committee towards the end of 2018. So what we did is we boiled those down in our application, and if you look at item 4A and go to the second page of item 4A, there are 8 tasks, and these are also, in case you need them, listed at the very top of that spreadsheet that we handed out. And so these are sort of the initial tasks that are trying to encompass some of the actions that are listed in the document. But as I've mentioned in the past, these tasks are not fully encompassing of what this committee could accomplish. It's just what we were tasked with to begin with. So standing up the JLUS Implementation Policy Committee and Implementation Technical Committee, one of the things we wanted to bring up at this point, and obviously this is completing task 1, is there a need to just have one committee, or do we need to set up a technical committee? Our staff recommendation, you see at the end of the memo, is that we really urge that we just keep it at one committee for the sake of streamlining. We have gotten a mixture of entities, representatives, or some, as I mentioned, are elected officials, and others are technical plan directors or assistant managers. And what it seems like is that it would make sense for the streamlining of the process to keep just one committee. But we wanted, obviously, you are going to be making that call, and so we wanted to just open that up for discussion. So that's something that we'll want you to think about, and we can discuss that a little further on. Secondly, you'll see that we have some low-hanging fruit, like creating military information brochures. Once we get some of those things drafted, we'll send them out to the committee for feedback to see if we're on the right target for what you think constituents are going to want to know about military operations as it relates to what impacts some of the systems we're concerned about. Some of it's just going to be as simple as what is a land use study. So we're going to work with the various entities here, military installations, to see what we can do to craft some things that will then also be online. So that's the focus of task 2. Task 3, regional energy radar site mapping. This is not intended to be some kind of public map, as it were, but something that we start off with this group looking at and trying to figure out, basically, are there good places where there's no conflict between flight and energy development in terms of like wind turbines and solar? Those are some of the key things that come up, even transmission lines. Or are there places where we know there's a potential conflict, and we just want to map simply in that way? Just try to collect what data we can to identify which places it would look like a conflict-free, and then what areas might have some potential conflict. We think that would be something that would help jurisdictions that are trying to make land use decisions when they have a project come in, and also it can help the military in sort of identifying places that you guys know are not going to be a significant issue for mission, a significant conflict. So that's the idea behind this task. And again, if you have questions on these tasks as I go through them, feel free to ask. Tasks 5 and 6, tasks 4 and 5 are similar in terms of them being a sub-area plan. The idea behind these is that with the city having recently completed the comprehensive plan, and El Paso County is currently working for the master plan, and then you have the airport working on a master plan update. There's a lot of different planning efforts going on that may be within a jurisdiction, and then there's other areas where they're not doing a plan update. But we have an opportunity with these sub-areas where we're just going to try and map what zoning is where across jurisdictions, since that's kind of a frame of reference that usually isn't out there. So we're going to try and use that, the sub-area plans, as a way to document what zoning is in place if there's 3 or 4 jurisdictions around a particular each one of these installations, as a way to help inform, and this will be something that the committee will contemplate, what are some issues that come up with some of the differences in zoning, some of the places where there might be an opportunity to create some standardization around if it's something that would be beneficial to both the cities in terms of having similar uses where across one side of the street is multifamily is allowed, and another side of the street is not. So that's going to be an opportunity to kind of look at that subrate plan. Standardized real estate disclosure language. The idea behind this is not to actually create a disclosure, but to look at what has been done in other areas, document what that language is, and see if we can help with some of those who are working in the real estate field. You may have one developer that has come up with a certain framework of this is how we inform our residents if we're close to a military installation. Another developer's come up with a different set of language. And so we're going to see if we can work to kind of create some kind of standard template that could then be used as a tool. So this is, just want to make sure that we're not looking to go to DORA and have a disclosure period. That wasn't the intent. Any questions on that one? And then with tasks 7 and 8, these are very general kind of supporting tasks. There isn't too much in the way that's specific with these. Mostly it's just with task number 7, just identifying what types of grant funding programs are out there and just treat that as a resource in case anyone can make use of that. And then with task 8, that is a very general kind of support role, where we're here to try and help facilitate wherever needed, holding meetings if someone needs to get together with someone on the military side and civilian side for discussion issue, we're here to help support and facilitate wherever needed. So task 8 is very much capped on. The expected benefits from doing implementation. The Office of Economic Adjustment for the Department of Defense doesn't have a ton of guidance in terms of how implementation should be done, simply because it's going to look different for each community. So what we're going to be looking for is stakeholders and entities that are here. As we continue to meet and go forward, we're going to have opportunities to discuss what do each of us see our roles with regards to the joint land use study specifically, and there'll be opportunities for discussion if there's other items that come up that are going on other places, if there's another entity out there, another stakeholder group working on some of these items with joint land use study or outside of that. Obviously, this is an opportunity to inform each other on what we're doing. So we see this as a good place to exchange information, to understand what is going on in our region, and that's one of the things that was the benefit of the last process, and we hope will continue with this one. So lastly, I want to return to the item of membership of this group. If we go with just having one implementation committee, there are a couple of entities that were only on the technical committee last time that we should probably see about bringing to the table. And if we were to do that, the way we do that was make a recommendation back to the PPHD board to add certain entities. The two that came to mind when we were looking at the rosters after the board's actions was that it would be important to have the Military Affairs Council / Defense Mission Task Force, depending on how you want to present that, but also the Colorado Department of Transportation. Both of those entities were on the technical committee, but were not originally on the roster for the policy committee. So if there's other entities that are missing that you believe need to be at this table, we would like all of you to offer that up as a recommendation back to the board. So I'm interested in your thoughts on it.
Well, it definitely makes sense to me that we have just one committee. Yeah, that's just common sense.
Yeah, administratively, it's a lot. We can get a lot more done.
Yeah.
Frankly, than in one committee. So.
Ditto.
I will third that.
Just a question, would there be the opportunity to set up ad hoc working groups that are very issue-specific, that
Yes.
maybe aren't a formalized committee?
Yes, and when we get, and I think I may have actually put this discussion item in with the bylaws, but within the bylaws, when we get to that item, you'll see that there's a framework in the bylaws that allow for a technical a technical committee or working groups to be formed if this committee so chooses. But it's not mandatory that that be done. It'll just kind of, if something arises where it makes sense and the committee says we should form a working group, or some kind of, any other sort of working group, that can be an action taken by the chief.
Would there be a way to include emergency managers or some umbrella group for first responders?
I think that with that would be one of those to be a good working group. We know that there's entities out there that are already meeting. I know there's the Community Crisis Network that has to do with the public information officers among, and I don't know how far out their territory goes in terms of who they include, but that's something where we can engage as part of a working group related to perhaps wildfire or because I'm assuming that's on everyone's mind. So that's something that we could help facilitate.
Or fire districts?
Yeah, because there are some kind of entities out there that we can look into and see who's there and see who we can engage with. And if anything, if there is something, we can invite them to come present at this meeting and be part of the discussion.
Brian, I just wanted to support just keeping one group. I think the other, at least the cities and counties, having department heads or staff people from the different departments to try to be on technical committees seemed to be a real challenge last time. And I'd also support the ad hoc groups when necessary to bring those in.
Brian, I would suggest that taking down the implementation measures is really more geared towards working groups anyway, when you look at them. So I don't think a technical group would really provide much of a benefit. Plus, I'd have to sit in both meetings, so I'm out.
It's a comment from Fort Carson here. As I think about joint land use, we're talking about, in many cases, landowners, right? So we have all the installations. We also have all the municipalities and folks that have codes and things around there that can focus on that. But you mentioned BLM, and that might be a player, because we certainly at Fort Carson do training out in the area, and BLM owns a big chunk of acreage in Colorado. So I don't know if it would be worthwhile. I also thought about the Guard and the reserves, but they really don't own anything except their real estate that's on somebody else's land, whether it's on an installation or out in the community per se. So, my thoughts.
And to that point, I would also encourage us to think about the U.S. Forest Service, because they along with BLM, own some share of that same property that we end up talking about as far as training, especially for Fort Carson. So, if there are folks in that regard, that I think that would be a good consideration. But again, that's just from my perspective.
Given your comments are well taken, because they were originally on the policy committee last time. They never actually, I think we had a BLM representative attend once.
Okay.
So what I'm thinking is that in order to help with focusing their attention on the items that are most critical with that, perhaps there is some kind of working group that is focused around those lands, use of those lands, whether it's wildfire.
Maybe it's other federal partners.
Yeah.
That have either under Interior or what have you, but.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that's come across my desk in the past 48 hours, is about the U.S. Forest Service and some consideration of land use that's, again, being looked at by USFS and could impact, as a result, some training issues. So,
would you like me to explore part of the next meeting, try to come up with a framework for a working group that might involve BLM, U.S. Forest Service, and go to the topics of hammock training, wildfire?
Brian, another group would probably be State Land Board in that group.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that would make sense, but again, you guys would know better than I, having gone through, an iteration of this process previously, that would be a good consideration. But it sounds like both BLM and USFS are, they're looking at those issues pretty actively if there's a public comment period that's upcoming. So
Yeah, it's upcoming. It might be worth just having BLM coming to our next meeting in October and giving a presentation. That might be a good thing. Have they talked to you, Commissioner Detmeyer, BLM, on the hammock?
Yeah, years back.
Oh, okay. Well, we just had last week.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's several years up in Teller County.
Yeah.
And it was a concern in our jurisdiction.
But as I said, they took their scope down quite a bit, and I think they even almost eliminated Teller County, if I read the map
I don't
right.
think so. I flew over last night, so.
Oh.
I will say Congressman Tipton's office reached out to me. There's conversation in the delegation on this issue, and it's spanning, a number of different congressional districts. So if that's helpful in any way or insightful.
And another partner that may be considered, again, maybe just for a presentation, but on working groups, Department of Interior, USGS in particular, because they're the folks that place the flood meters all over the area, all over the Front Range. Plus, they have access to excellent GIS products.
We'll reach out to these groups then and see how we can engage them and try to provide some suggestions out to the group in terms, if anything, at a minimum, we'll see if we can get presentations at the October 25th meeting. And we can also send out an email to the group in interim to find out if, giving our conversations with them, if it sounds like, what do they see their engagement with this? So we can get that information out to all of you after we contact them. Does that sound good, or is there other things you should consider?
I think that's good. Yeah.
All right, so, yes.
Brian, do you have the ability or not have the ability, going back to the 8 tasks, to tweak the wording on those or not?
Yes, we will.
The concern on Task 4 and in Task 5 to a lesser extent is that coordination is really going to have to be with the City of Colorado Springs also. In the case of Peterson Air Force Base, 3 of the 4 sides are City of Colorado Springs land use jurisdiction. And the Air Force Academy, there's a city role and a county role, and I think also, frankly, Monument. So if the language was tweaked to talk about coordinating with jurisdictions as needed or something, relevant jurisdictions, to keep it really general, then because there's going to have to be a lot of coordination with the city, especially on Peterson.
So that brings up a good point related to the role here. One of the roles of this committee going forward is that we created this list of tasks with the intent that at some point there would be a scope adjustment during this process, because we were kind of taking a stab at it. And we knew once we got the implementation committee together, it would have been a certain amount of passage of time where some items may have shifted. Some items might have come to the fore in terms of being important that we work on during this next 18-month period next year. So one of the things we are looking to do, and we'll send out an email regarding this as well, is we would like ideas from you as to what might be another comments on these 8 tasks as to do we need to shift the language. We've already noted that there's some tasks where the way it presents, it doesn't present accurately to what we'd like to do. What we think we need to do. So we'd like comments on the 8 tasks and how we might be able to shift that language to do something that's maybe more accurate from your perspectives. But secondly, if we're going to extend this grant out, which we know we're going to have to, because the start date was March 27th, originally anticipated a start date of January 1. There's some delays in processing at the DOE, so we already know we're going to have an extra 3 months worth of funding there. We also believe we may be able to extend it out closer to November. With that, amending the scope at the same time, we can add in another task or 2 to the grant scope, so we have 9 or 10 tasks. So those are the 2 items that we're going to send out an email about to kind of get feedback on. How can we define these tasks with a better description of what we're doing, and then also ideas from you guys after looking at the tasks, if there's 1 or 2 tasks where we might want to adjust. So anyway, we are going to offer that out. Any comments on that? Feedback?
Yeah, the only thing I'd mention is, having been a part of this over the last 2 years, 3 years, there's a lot of effort that went into these tasks. I kind of complained that there were too many at the end of the day to keep track of. But having said that, I would not support a grand rewrite at this point. That's not what you said. But I would just caution us that someone got together and thought these were the things that the land use study ought to focus on. There may be some of them that, quite frankly, have grown less of a priority now because some things have been done. there's enough meat in here that if we only worked on half of them that are high priority, we'd probably make some progress. I wouldn't want to see a grand rewrite. Everybody gets together and starts wordsmithing all the different topics that are in here. That's not what you said, but I just throw that out there.
Yeah, that's a good clarification, because, yeah, we're not looking to do a grand rewrite either. I don't think the OEA would want us to do a grand rewrite. They just want minor tweaks, if there's minor tweaks. That's kind of what we're looking for. Refinements. And then see if we can add another task or two to kind of tack on. We've had some ideas as we've gotten going on this that we can suggest. One of those is trying to create something for each entity in the area that helps kind of filter down and work with each entity to create this, but almost like a sort of pamphlet that's these kind of the core tasks, actions that relate most to your entity. And here's a reference to what page within the JLUS you might want to go to. So it's something that would stand alone regardless of whether there's staff here. It's kind of a little how-to guide. And so that's one idea we have that might help out so that it's encompassing a lot of actions rather than just one. But again, we're open to ideas, and so we'll be sending out some follow-up after this meeting to kind of generate discussion. Any thoughts at this point of things that we should try and focus on if you want us to start looking into something? An additional task or two?
Brian, the specific actions that are associated with each of those tasks, that's what this is intended to represent. Each of these 109 are a specific action on the path to solving these 8.
It does not encompass all 109. It's a portion of those 109 actions. So what we did is we tried to take some of these actions and figure out, okay, if you were to take these that are related and create a task out of them, what would that be? And so the spreadsheet, you won't see a grant task associated with every single action in that spreadsheet, but you will see a grant task associated with many of them.
So simply stated, seems to me anyway, looking at these tasks and deciding what 3 or 4 very specific actions, corrective actions, need to be done in order to move the ball in that particular task. Do we get to that at some point?
Yes, absolutely. That's something that we
Early in the process?
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the things, because we're going to utilize email as an interim way to communicate with all of you to get feedback. These meetings are a chance to take some additional action, but there's a lot of things we can do with getting feedback in terms of which, that's one of the first actions when we get to item 4D, implementation actions and execution plan. We can do a deeper dive into that and start talking about how we might go about doing that. All right, so what I've heard from the committee thus far is that we should, it sounds like there's interest in creating some working groups pertaining to, and at least getting some presentations from some of these, some of the federal partners. And so we can try and reach out to them and get some feedback on what that might look like, and then share that with you all and get your input. And then with, in terms of adding voting entities going back to the board, it sounds like what the group would like is to add CDOT, the MAC, and possibly U.S. Forest Service and DLM. And state land. Okay, so those 5 we can add to this committee. So we can go back to the board and we'll ask for that. Anything else we should do when we go back to the board with that?
Do you need a formal recommendation to do that?
Yeah, I think that once we go through the bylaws and vice chair, we can, if we want to take an action on that, we can do so.
Sure.
So we can add that as sort of an item.
Ryan, do you need a formal recommendation to not have a technical committee?
Yeah, we can do that at the same time, because those are very much related. Because if you decide you're not going to have a technical committee, well then you want to add these entities to the policy committee. So I'll propose something when you get towards the end of the agenda. All right, that's all I have on this item. We've handed out rosters. We will make those corrections. There were some moving pieces at the last minute in terms of who's going to be representing certain entities and other things we need to refine on that. So we'll get a more up-to-date roster out to you in August with some additional representatives from some of the smaller communities that we haven't heard back from yet.
Okay, so we'll get the names right, so I'm not calling people the wrong names with their cards. Okay, so we go to item B under action items on selection of a chair and vice chair. Like I said, I just took over because of the previous board, but we can open it up to chair and vice chair of any kind of nominations. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and nominate myself.
For chair?
For chair.
Okay.
Assuming you don't want to continue.
No, I'm good. I'm good with it, with ever. So yeah. Okay, we have a nomination for chair. Okay, we have a second from Phil. Any other nominations for chair? Okay, I'll close nominations, and I guess by acclamation, you're the new chair. Okay, yay! So I'll let you take over.
Nominations for vice chair. Or appointments.
Nominate Tim Payne if he's willing.
Are there any other nominations? Nominations been closed. All in favor, I guess we got it by acclamation.
Mark, you didn't say much. You just kind of sitting over there. You don't want to get nominated.
He looked like he was seeking deep cover. Okay, I think the next item up is 4C, review and adoption of committee bylaws. Brian?
So this will be a very brief introduction to the bylaws. They are they're almost exactly the same as the ones we had last time for the policy committee. We didn't want to mess with that too much. However, I did want to point out two items that we did kind of make sure were in there. One of the things we found, of course, was that sometimes during the course of a process, you might have some times where not as many people can make it. And therefore, we made sure that in here that if an entity, for example, does not have a representative, has not selected one, that does not count towards quorum, we're trying to do as much as we can to make sure that each meeting we can actually accomplish actions. The other thing we wanted to add is that because we do have a lot of smaller entities, such as Cripple Creek or Victor or Callahan or Rama, we wanted to offer up that if they so choose, and they're not able to make a meeting, that they could use their county rep as a proxy if there's any voting to take place. So those are two items that we wanted to highlight, just because we want to make sure that during this 18-month process, we don't have 6 months in between meetings where something isn't able to kind of be deliberated. So what are your thoughts on that? If there are any, otherwise, the bylaws are fairly straightforward.
Ryan, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can you tell me where the language is about the proxy being in the county rep?
That should be under... We have it under voting member. It was supposed to be under the voting member.
The last sentence of Article 3A.
3A. There we go. There we go. Yeah, under membership under 3A. Yeah, one of the things we were concerned about in talking with Cripple Creek, or not Cripple Creek, in the past talking with Victor, sometimes because they only have 8 staff members, sometimes they have a hard time attending things. And depending, they may want to be more focused when a particular issue comes up or through a working group. So we wanted to provide that as an outlet, or if you're Park County or Fairfield, coming up with fair play. We just want to offer that up if they so select. They would have to provide that in writing to us. And of course, the county rep would have to review it.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
On page 5, the subparagraph B, JLUS Implementation Technical Committee, could that be changed to working groups? Since we've decided we don't need a technical committee?
Yes, since we do that, we can actually strike that and just leave item C, implementation working groups.
Okay.
Move that up to section B. Strike what is existing in section B.
You might need to revise the composition of those, identify certain members of the technical committee in that paragraph.
Yes.
It probably as needed.
Yeah, we can rephrase it so it's more general.
Okay, Brian, going to the quorum that you have, page 7 in subparagraph, or paragraph G. A majority of the voting membership of the committee present. Well, what would be it? I mean, that sounds like the members present, so I'm not sure what your majority is referring to.
But the reason why is that we have an or right after that says or available by conference call. So we wanted to note people present at the meeting or if someone's available by the conference call. So that's.
So what would be what's the point of the majority, though? It sounds to me like if you have everybody call in, then you don't have a quorum. So I'm looking at the language. I want to make sure that we don't knock ourselves out of having a quorum. I think to simplify that language is the members present.
Okay, we can just take that out.
Present or by conference call.
Yeah, because it was trying to intend that, okay, if you look at the roster, you have the full voting membership.
Right.
The full, and then it's whatever portions there, majority is present or on conference call.
Yeah, but
So we can simplify
the point being, for example, if you took today, we would not have a quorum, right? Because you got half the people that aren't even designated yet.
Yeah.
So you don't want us to get into a trap where we find ourselves with a working group, but
Yeah.
technically not having a quorum. So members present or something like that.
Okay, we'll switch that language so it's more clear there.
Yeah.
Simplify that to get to that exact term.
Any other comments by anybody?
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Is the intention of the proxy to be a permanent proxy or a,
No, as needed, because we don't want, if it's just a temporary, say there's a staffing shortage in one of the smaller communities, and they're waiting until they're able to get someone in there, once they get a staff person in there, if they want to say, no, we can now attend, well, it doesn't mean that they can't go back and join the committee.
but it would be permanent until change. So Alma could come in and say, I want my Park County Commissioner to permanently be, so that Park County Commissioner, if they were here, would have 2 votes all the time.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, I think we're supposed to adopt these now,
Yes, as amended.
as amended. So entertain a motion to adopt as amended. So moved. Have a motion. Second?
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We got it? Okay, next up, implementation actions and execution plan. Brian, you still got it.
Yeah, I know. It's just kind of the way this first meeting is going to go. What we hope is that as we go forward, that there'll be other members and other personnel that are providing presentations, but for the purpose of this one, just get this kicked off. One of the key things that we hope with this committee is that as the Department of Defense continues to remind myself, we're not going to fund you forever. So one of the key things, because we know that we have this funding now to help with implementation, there are absolutely no guarantees that we'll continue to get that funding in the future. We want to do as much as we can right now as staff to support you guys in anything you need to help take on more of the joint land use study tasks, take as much ownership of the document as possible. So one of the intents is that we'll be asking for you to say, how can we help you guys do that? What can we do? And then also, when there are items in here that are already being handled by someone else, by another entity, We want to do our best to note that, because then that's something we don't need to provide as much support on. Someone's already taken ownership and they're running with it. So the idea is that this committee will help with that, with help saying, okay, as a community, we're going to really focus, we're going to do what we can to help on these actions. This is something we're going to prioritize. And but again, this is all recommendational, so it really is up to all of you in terms of what you want to do with this document, and we're here to support that. So that's going to be one of the items that is of great focus as we're looking through actions. I want to take you to the spreadsheet of actions briefly. So what we did is we just organized this by action number. As Keith was pointing out, on the left side we have put phase 1 grant task, just in case there is a phase 2, but for right now just phase 1 grant task. During the early application process, we tried to identify which actions would tie into each grant task. In some cases, you might have an action that's general enough that it ties into multiple. So in that column, in that first column on the left, that's what you'll see. The strategy and action number, and these are grouped by strategy, so they're in numerical order. So 1.1 in bold, improved collaboration among military and community stakeholders, JLUS topics. That is a strategy. And then the digits that are 3 digits, those are the numbers, the action numbers. These all correspond directly with Chapter 10. In the column to the right of the milestone description, or the actions, we have potential time frame. Now, this is simply something that we came up with as a starting point. By no means does this mean this is the way we have to do this. We wanted to provide a starting point as food for thought for all of you to figure out what is a likely time frame for some of these actions, at least as much as you think it's different than what we have here. So as you're going through this and you're looking at actions that pertain to your entity and you believe that we should look at those in different time frames, these will help shape how we're doing this implementation. What are things we need to focus on in the next 3 to 5 years, and what might be ongoing, as in they're just things that are always going to be there. What items are 5 to 10 years out. Also, if you feel that we need to adjust our time frames, if having these 4 time frames is not a good way to do it, let us know if you think a better way to document this, if there is a better way for us to do this. In the column to the right of that, we have suggested priority. Because we had gotten this feedback in the last process of the whole, red, green, yellow, stop, caution, go, we decided that we'd try out a prioritization system just as a starting point. This is not anything we're married to, but we wanted to throw it out there for your feedback. If you feel that some of these critical priorities are much lower, or some of the low priorities are much higher, please provide feedback as that relates to your entity. The other thing is, some stakeholders may have a higher level priority with one, and another entity may not have a priority with that one. So we're cognizant of that, and if we get that on some actions, we'll figure out a way to break that out. The recommended lead is simply the recommended lead that came out of the last process. We can always change that. That was just kind of a starting point. So if there's entities that feel that they would like to provide a leadership role on that, we would like to hear that, and we can get that into the tracking sheet. If it's something that you are doing, you're already doing, or you think you should do. The idea behind this draft actions table is that this will become a tracking mechanism to help keep an eyeball on what is going on, where are some things that we might need to elevate later, or when we've completed something, we can note it, we can document that it's either close to completion or it's something that we haven't started yet. So that's the idea behind what this tool is intended to be. Once we get to a point where it's fairly finalized, we can take this and put it online on the Joint Land Use Study Program page as a way for anyone to go and look and see what is being done. That was our thought with why we wanted to create this. You have also been sent this with the meeting packet. We sent this to you as an Excel spreadsheet so that you can have your, experiment with it, try things, enter in information. So we encourage you to use that spreadsheet to enter in that information. It has a few more columns than this, some other entry fields. We shrunk it down to this size so we can actually fit on 11 by 17 and hand it out. But the actual matrix can have a lot more information in it. But we hope it'll be something that either you guys, all of you are able to use as a tool once we get it finalized, but also help inform us as staff as to how you want us to track these things and what you all see as priorities and time frames. With that, this is a lot to look at once, so we encourage you to take your time with it. You don't need to provide comments right now, but are there any comments at this time? Do you think that we're on the right track in terms of the tracking?
Any questions or comments?
Question, so if we review this and have recommendations for changes, should we bring them to the next regular meeting or provide those via email? Like what?
Send them straight to staff, because what we're going to try and do is put all that input into the spreadsheet and then be able to finalize that and send it back out before the next meeting. So what we'd encourage is that if possible, by the end of August, and we'll send out an email, as part of the email follow-up we're going to send out, we'll send out by the end of August. We hope to get some feedback from you as much as possible as to what items you feel we need to modify in terms of the time frame and priority. Obviously, the milestone description, those actions we have to stay as is because that's what's in the document. But we can always provide comments here. In some cases, you may actually find actions that they've been taken care of or they're no longer an issue anymore. There might be some in there where it's just something we should frankly ignore. That is a possibility too. So I wanted to provide that as an option. If you see something say, this is no longer relevant, it's been taken care of because of this, we don't need to work on it. Obviously, this will help us cut out things if there's something that's just really not worth our focus. So.
Any other questions, comments? Notice this is a recommend item under the action item, so I guess we'll take it home and absorb it and put the recommendations in. One suggestion would be to post the spreadsheet on a site that we can have access to so we see it as it updates.
Yes, I think that we can probably do some of that with using OneDrive. The military partners may have a challenge in getting to that, but we'll figure out a workaround. I know sometimes with the sharing, the document sharing, there can be a security issue. So we'll figure out a workaround, but we'll get it at least to where all the community partners can access through a OneDrive account or Google Docs. Anyone have a preference between an Office-based or a Google-based?
I prefer Office, but I mean, I'll leave it open.
Okay, that's what we're a Microsoft Office environment. So
Yeah, well, I think most of us are Office.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So when we go through and we start tracking progress on each of these priorities or each of these actions, are we going to separate out those that are ongoing versus those that have a finite timeline? Because obviously those that are ongoing, your tracking is going to go on and on forever.
Yes.
And it would be nice to separate those out that have a finite timeline so you can show tangible progress without kind of convoluting it with some of the other ongoing items.
Absolutely, because once we know from the committee here that there aren't items that we may have mislabeled as ongoing, we believe we'll have a finite end, we will separate those ongoing into that list. And it's just sort of a static list that's there, and we can remove these other columns. And then we'll just have it stripped down to those actions that do have a time frame and a priority.
Now, I appreciate kind of putting it in numerical order. I understand why you did that, but I think in terms of showing progress, it's necessary to split those out.
Absolutely. We went back and forth as to how to do it this first time, but we decided we can always order them later, depending on, because we figured that the priorities may change after you provide comments and the time frames, in which case we'd have to order them differently. So there's a couple of different ways we're planning to create outgrowths of this tracking tool. One is showing by time period which actions should be within each time period, and then prioritized within that time period. So we, in theory, would have a 1 to 2 year spread, or 3 to 5, and so on.
Thank you.
Yes.
So in Chapter 10, there was a column about which military installations the task was applicable to, and that is not in the 4-page one. There's definitely a few that are very installation specific, but the title of the task doesn't reflect that. For example, on page 2, they talk about there's a manage encroachment issues that can interfere with operations on runway 13-31, and that's Peterson, I think. I don't know.
And the reason why we didn't include it is because it is fairly well laid out within the
Okay.
Chapter 10. So we thought, do we need to add those checkboxes? And we can do that if that would be of assistance. We can certainly add that column.
I don't know if we need to add the column per se, but there's maybe just a few that we just have to put in parentheses, which base of its
Just
meaning.
to
Yeah.
quickly note. Okay,
Yeah.
we can do that, and if the military representatives do have particular ones like that, we want to make sure we note that, we can find a way to do that. But yeah, we kind of made the assumption, given how prominently it was in the chapter, we did go with it, but we can certainly do that. So the last part of this item is just the last paragraph to kind of provide a note of something else that we're going to try and organize. We have been in contact during the last project with another consultant that was doing implementation on HDR, was doing implementation of having improving ground and some other items. And one of the things we were talking about was just how do you go about implementation. So one of the things they're working on is creating kind of a best practices kind of white paper on how you do implementation, because there isn't something out there really like that. So they were interested in looking to us as a case study since we were starting implementation right now. So one of the things that's part of that is that they're going to try and work up some kind of scorecard with an execution plan. And we're planning to try and have an execution plan workshop sometime in September. So I want to make you aware, that's not a mandatory meeting. It would be for those that are interested in attending, but we would encourage you to attend that so we can try and work through. It could be very educational in figuring out how we go about this process. It should be good information exchange. So that's something we want to offer up. We'll send out a doodle poll for that one to see what your availability and what makes sense for the most members to attend. It wouldn't be something where there's any voting or adoption of anything necessarily. It would be in preparation for the October meeting in case we did want to adopt some form of execution plan. So are there any questions on that? Okay. So just so you know, in the recommendations, we've provided 3 recommended actions for what we would hope to do with the spreadsheet, and so and encouraging attendance of that execution plan workshop. So we also attached some reference from 2 GAO reports that relate to mechanisms that are used to try and gauge how you go about implementing and measuring progress and tracking metrics. Because obviously that's going to be one of our challenges. Some of these things are going to be hard to figure out how you nail down, and other things are going to be easier. And that's all I have.
Okay. Any other comments? Questions? No. Okay, running down information items, installation reports.
If I may?
Yes.
Given the earlier comment that we should vote on whether to, now that we've established the bylaws, established the chair and vice chair, we should recommend doing an item E ad hoc.
Oh,
that would,
you're correct, I forgot that.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
So my understanding, and feel free for someone else to throw out a revision to this motion, but my understanding is that we would recommend to the board, PPACG board, that we add the entity seats of Colorado Department of Transportation, Bureau of Land Management, State Land Board, Colorado State Land Board, Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Forest Service,
Defense Mission Task Force.
Defense Mission Task Force.
I think that's it.
And then we would also opt to, that's right, the technical committee was not part of that. I think that was the only motion, was to recommend the addition of those seats.
But to also not have a technical committee.
And to not have a technical committee, yes.
Right, yes.
Just a clarification, Brian, are those voting entities or non-voting entities?
Federal entities, per the grant, are not allowed to vote on these items.
Okay.
They would be non-voting members if they're a federal entity.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yep. State entities are able to be voting members.
Thank you.
Okay, so moved.
So move. Second.
Second.
Second, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
So that takes care of 4E. 5A, installation reports related to land use. To any of the defense military installations, care to, at this point, have comments?
Fort Carson, the only thing I'd note is for folks that weren't part of the last couple of years. Pinion Canyon Maneuver Site is not part of this joint land use study implementation plan. I think if you saw the report, you recognize that's not in there. There's a lot of activity focused on Pinion Canyon with the Army and the community here, and a lot of help around the table, but it's not part of this JLUS. That's, I think, all I have today.
I think that would also qualify as a political landmine. Any other defense installation reports at this time? Okay, any community reports on land use?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just as a reminder, El Paso County, as Brian mentioned, is in the process of updating our 30-some-year-old master plan. There's a survey out on the county's main website. There's a link to it. If you follow that link, there are surveys that are out there for citizens of the county and as well as business for the business community. There's also a really interesting mapping tool if you want to map kind of the various assets, deficiencies in your neighborhood. I would definitely encourage you to do that. So the period for gathering that data will end the end of August, and we'll be transitioning into the visioning stage of the process. So we have about a month left to gather that data, but we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,200 responses on the survey so far. My goal is to get to 5,000. We're going to need a pretty strong push, so hopefully all of you can be a part of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just really a forward-thinking announcement. Colorado Springs has got an RFP out now for our zoning code update, subject to funding, which would mostly start next year. So it'll be the first comprehensive zoning code update in 20 years. Peter Wysocki, who's on this committee, can give you updates going forward. But maybe 10 of these action items would have some relationship there, either directly or just kind of a sensitivity. So that'll be something that will probably mesh pretty well with this process.
And Carl, aren't you also starting the process of updating the annexation plan?
We weren't going to mention that, but yes, we are. We're doing a lot of the back office work. And interestingly enough, just the other day, I did this kind of check in the box thing about military installations, Peterson being fully annexed, and now we've annexed a little piece of Air Force Academy, and the presumption is that's how it would stay, but that becomes a decision kind of jointly between the city and the installations if, for whatever reason, that might change. But
Sorry to put you on the spot. But
yes, we are doing that, and we're doing a housing plan, and we're going to be doing neighborhood planning. We're doing a lot of work. So.
I will say that I received an big Army HQ housing survey results report this afternoon from the Pentagon. I have not had a chance to read it, but I'm glad to share that with anyone who's interested.
Okay. Any others?
One last thing I'll just remind is, if you want some of the EQs, they have them over there. We were at the meeting last night, Ann and I thought it was great, and we're looking forward to reading through that report and just making sure we can integrate that stuff into what we do here. So looking forward to that.
Okay. And the last call around, we've got the future meeting dates up. I think you're going to have a option in September as well, I think you mentioned. And last call for comments. Nothing further, we are adjourned.
Oh, that would be nice. Even better.
Real estate professionals, but it's kind of in a shop. We were going to submit it as part of our comments into the master plan, so I'll note that I'll note in my letter that I handed it to you.
Check that box now.
And Mark Gephardt was at the meeting last night.
Thanks for taking us on, and I'm sorry.
You're going to go home and answer what?
Yeah, what did I do? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we'll find out what kind of people want it. It's power-bound or like that, but feel free to have it.
Oh, no, I like binders.
Good. Yeah, see, some people want it, some,